All right. What's up, people? I just got back from the bathroom. Looks like a few people have arrived. How's everyone doing? Got King Cameron in the house, Neural Shroud. What's going on, people? Just have my morning coffee here. It's 10 a.m., but shoot me some questions or talking points, and I will start to riff. What do I think of Camille Paglia? Definitely admire and respect her. I think she's very smart and a very strong-willed, very independent thinker. The real deal, in other words. I'm actually not super familiar with her books, so I won't speak to them, but you can tell the real deal from the fakers, I think, pretty clearly through certain behavioral markers, let's call them. And she's definitely the real deal. So, and as for her kind of contemporary role in the culture wars or her kind of current set of positions that she's associated with, they're obviously fairly well correlated to my own views. So yeah, I think it's pretty. I think that's a pretty clear verdict that I'm generally quite supportive of her project and what she represents. I like people who are just really irascible like her. I mean, she's like a real firecracker, just high energy, doesn't give a shit what people think, and has been pretty much just pursuing her lines of inquiry, for her whole life without much, distraction or whatever. She was actually I think she might still be at the University of Arts in Philadelphia, and I lived in Philadelphia for like 10 years. So I actually knew about her quite a while ago. I hope that answers your question. King Cameron, you're a Philly, New Jersey native as well. Yeah, I grew up in New Jersey, lived in Philly for like 10 years from about like 18 to 28. Neural Shroud wants to know, how is the general financial stability looking for me with the Patreon, books, stream, etc.? Great question. I'd be happy to discuss this for a little bit. Let me adjust this just a little bit. There you go. Things are looking good. The growth rates, I think, are promising. I'm definitely not close to any type of really comfortable financial stability, but we're making a little bit more than we spend each month. But that's with like the sum total of all of the activities I'm doing. So I do a little bit of paid freelance work right now from a few different collaborators or clients. So right now, the overall financial picture is fine. We are making more than we're spending. So, that's the basic criteria. But, it's not enough for a decent and comfortable life, especially if we want to have kids. We don't have kids yet, so it's doable. But yeah, I need to keep growing things. I need to keep being strategic and also kind of brutally honest about what's working, what's not, what's promising, what's not, and finding a way to make it all financially stable. But what I will say is that the growth rates, which is that's kind of the metric I'm most interested in right now. So I can make kind of reasonable extrapolations about how much will all of this work be making in 2 years and 3 years and 4 years, whatever. And the growth rates look good. I think everything has ticked up kind of noticeably since I left academia, and now that I'm doing all this stuff full time. Like the full time work definitely accelerates the growth in the metrics, in the key metrics. So that's good to see that the greater amount of work being invested is having tangible results. And the other thing is that I'm only doing a few experimental things right now that are really short and specific and contained. And so that the point of that is to get a lot of data on a bunch of different types of projects. One, to learn how to do them well. Like presumably I'm going to be doing things that, in ways that could be much more optimized, but you only figure that out by trying and doing things, right? So I'm purposely doing a large number of small projects just to get some data. And so like, if you look at the Deleuze book, for instance, I mean, it's probably going to make about $1,000 by the time it's published. And it's not like a huge sum of money, but it's not bad either for something that I'm just doing pretty quickly in a few months. You know, one could even imagine I could do, a whole series of books, short books like that, and if they each make 1,000 in the self-publishing world, there's a fairly well documented insight that the more books you write, the more it feeds your back catalog. So like if you publish when you self-publish your fifth book, it generally tends to increase sales for your first book also. And so there are some interesting kind of long-term benefits or gains that you that only kind of click in as you add more and more works to your catalog or whatever. So that will all be interesting to see, but I think for the time being, it's all promising. I have a few other kind of higher value experiments that I'm doing soon. So my hunch is at this point that the philosophy and the theory stuff, it brings in some patrons and it brings in, I can publish my own books and do stuff like that, but it's probably not going to. I don't think that it's going to. The philosophy stuff alone is not going to. It's probably not going to cut it. Maybe, um, but my wager is that once I start doing my more kind of technical, once I bring my technical skills into the larger ensemble of stuff that I'm kind of offering, I think what seems more likely is I will do some high value I might do like some instructional books on like data analysis or something like that using R. The stuff that I have tons of material on and am quite skilled with, I could probably create some valuable materials there that's the type of stuff people are really worth like able and willing to pay for because it increases their market value. So, there's actually a burgeoning little cottage industry of technical books that sell for a lot of money. Like people will write books about how to do X in some programming language or whatever. And you can sell those for like $20, $30, even more sometimes if they're good and if they have good word of mouth traction. So I think one of my next projects is going to be a instructional book on basically I haven't exactly decided on how I want to frame it, but it'll be something like data hacking for bloggers or something like that. It'll be a kind of very simple, hopefully punchy and really practical kind of guidebook to analyzing social data in R, specifically for kind of non-programmers. And yeah, I'll probably put a higher price tag on that. And one of my wagers is that type of work. Then I could also do videos and possibly courses on that type of stuff. That type of stuff tends to make much more money because it's concretely market value that you're giving people. You're making them more valuable, so they're willing to cough up a little bit more. So it's possible that the technical stuff that has higher margins will kind of end up subsidizing the more philosophical and weird niche stuff. So we'll find out. As I said, I'm going to be doing all this over the next few months. So, but even so far, I mean, the patron growth is good. The even like super chat growth is pretty promising. I think as I'm getting more and more guests that are kind of like famous or whatever, that obviously helps accelerate the patron growth. So that's promising because I've had a bunch of pretty high profile guests, and I think I'm going to consolidate that moving forward over the next few months. So hopefully that will bring more patron growth and super chats and stuff like that. And yeah, I have a course coming out right now with Johannes Niederhauser. If you remember, he was the really cool dude I met in London who's a Heidegger scholar, and we had a really good live stream a few months ago. People really liked it. So I hit him up and I said, "Hey, let's do a course, man. Let's you know, instead of churning out these like long philosophy videos on YouTube that not that many people watch, let's do something like really organized and high value. Let's do like a series of deep lectures on Deleuze and Heidegger. You do Heidegger, I'll do Deleuze. It'll all be about technology. And let's structure it like a course and see if we can create something really valuable that people are willing to pay for and make a better experience that way." So we just launched that. So we don't know yet how much that's going to earn. We haven't even decided exactly the parameters of how to do it, but we're working on the content now. And yeah, so I'll give you a better answer in like 6 months, but so far so good, definitely. I think. Let's see what else we got. Oh, King Cameron says that he is one of Camille Paglia's students. That's cool. Students were pulling fire alarms during her lectures. That's funny. All right, Neural Shroud's got to go. See you, dude. Nice talk with you. King Cameron says, the sheer magnitude of different minds that you have brought together on this channel is so fucking important. IMO. Thank you. I have a feeling that the growth rates will only increase. Thanks, dude. I really appreciate the encouragement. It's really nice to hear. Yeah, always helps to hear kind words. I agree. I think so. Yeah, I'll comment on that briefly. I think the strategy I've pursued early on, well, it wasn't really a conscious strategy, but it was, I guess, a strategy looking back on it, was that there are so many interesting and valuable people who are not famous. There's a huge mass of them, right? And they're not hard to get on your live stream because they're not exactly, having their door knocked down by invitations to appear on other things. So when you're first starting out with some kind of podcast type project, I had this intuition that like a lot of people want to just look for more famous people and they have this like strategy of social climbing. But that's actually, I mean, it's one strategy, it's fine, but and the strategy I pursued, I think was kind of unique and not a lot of people do it, but I think it worked and it actually was a really important kind of unique quality of everything I'm doing. And it still is. And I'm going to keep it this way, even if I am kind of doing a little bit more social climbing to bring on more famous guests or whatever. And the unique strategy I pursued was basically this kind of lateral strategy where I was just looking around me to peers who are not famous and but who are interesting. And when you do that, there's like so many people that you can do a lot of content and you can kind of use quantity to make up for, the lack of like fame or notoriety that your guests have. And it worked. Like people are really just interested in interesting stuff. People care less and less, I believe. This is one of my hypotheses that people care less and less about fame and celebrity, and they really just want to listen to interesting ideas, and they're really focused on the ideas. And if you have interesting ideas, whether they're coming from you or from any random person, if the ideas are interesting and cool to listen to, people will get it and people will want that and people will sign up for that, even if there's no fame or celebrity at all. And I think a lot of creative people who are interested in doing creative projects on the internet, they don't realize this fully yet. It's really a radical insight. And it's a beautiful, really cool, amazing, fact of how these things work. So yeah, I'm really thinking more about that. And I really want to kind of try to communicate that to people better. Because a lot of people, they feel like they can't do a podcast or they can't do a blog or they can't do anything until they have like some famous people kind of in their, in their networks or something. Like people are always trying to impress people above them or whatever. But you don't necessarily need to do that to like create a very unique and valuable little culture that you enjoy and that the people around you really find worthwhile and interesting and valuable. I think that's really been one of the unique kind of discoveries or achievements of what I've done, somewhat accidentally, but looking back on it, that seems to be a kind of unique fact of what I'm doing, I think. So I'd like to share that more, get that message across. Hey, James Simkin in the house. James says, hi, Justin. Really enjoy your live streams. Great brain food. I was wondering whether you've ever thought of exploring the arguments for censorship, such as in the Catholic Index of prohibited books. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I haven't thought about it terribly much, but yeah, I definitely have some sympathy for a certain kind of censorship. The problem with kind of informal political correctness censorship today is that it's being enforced by a mob, essentially, for reasons that are very hidden. There are kind of ulterior motives beneath it all. And whenever there's censorship done in this kind of informal, essentially social type of way, whenever it's a kind of emergent social phenomenon, censorship is almost always going to be bad because it's essentially just kind of group psychology, kind of oppressing free individuals. But I think definitely a certain type of censorship could very well be valuable and indeed optimal as kind of social policy. And yeah, I think the ideal, if there's going to be censorship, would be some type of code that is as maximally as possible validated according to, you know, essentially evolved human needs, right? Like we would want a code that prohibits only that which is truly bad, that which is truly unwholesome for most people and has very little positive upshot, like truly socially destructive forms of speech or even possibly thinking, if you want to be kind of authoritarian about it. I'm not opposed to that idea in principle. Like if we could find the code that is optimal and accurately reflective of the true needs of a human community, I would be in favor of even pretty severe censorship. Look, the fact is, I do think that most media today is utterly harmful. I mean, I really do think that. I almost can't talk about this openly with even like friends and family because I really, really come off as a kind of ridiculous reactionary when it comes to popular media like TV and movies and stuff like that. I really think we'd be better off if it was all banned for the most part. On the other hand, I am a free speech absolutist in a kind of liberal democratic setting that we find ourselves. I would much rather there be kind of some excessive decadence and insanity and violence in and unwholesomeness in contemporary culture than allow the currently dominant kind of social entrepreneurs to do the censoring. So in the current context, I'm free speech absolutist, no doubt. I'd rather it all be said at all times than allow the current censors to function as censors. But if we had a true and legitimate censor that could actually hold us accountable to a code that's a truly good, wholesome code reflective of our needs, then I would support it in principle. The question is how to do that. It's not at all clear that there's any road towards that type of system or structure that would in fact be coherent and defensible. There might be. Well, if there is, I think I think it's the one that I've articulated in the concept of neo-feudal techno-communism. In other words, I think groups can do this voluntarily. Like small groups can autonomously design principles or codes, sometimes even literally codes as in software. I think groups can design or code the rules of censorship that they believe reflect their best interests. And I think it's increasingly possible to use technology to essentially self-enforce these things in autonomous small group ways. And I think that's fine. I think that's great because it essentially it doesn't violate anyone's kind of individual rights because it's purely voluntary. And also, a large number of these types of experiments can over time iterate towards what is actually best for human societies in a kind of genuine scientific evolutionary kind of way, right? Because whenever you have a large number of experiments and some things work and some things don't work practically, then you have that kind of reality testing mechanism. So I think that could be promising. I definitely think like if I had my own community, for instance, if I was like the leader or the co-leader of some type of intentional community or whatever, kind of along the lines of like a techno-communist patch, as I've described it in that blog post, I would definitely favor certain forms of censorship. Like I think, I would suggest, people should not be allowed to watch like unwholesome movies with like too much violence in them or something like that. I mean, I do think that would be good. And if as long as it's voluntary for other people, then it's all good. So that's my take on it. What else? We got a few people in the house. Who else is here? How are you? Tell me what's going on. Give me something to riff on. Let's see. All right. King Cameron says, What secondary readings would you recommend about Deleuze? I've been trained in a very anti-post-structuralist kind of view, but your discussions about him make me feel as if he had something. Well, honestly, Base Deleuze will be the only book that you need. There is other good secondary literature, but I really am trying to write a book that is exactly for people like you. And just reading Base Deleuze will basically give you the overall bird's eye view that you need to essentially understand him and be able to kind of integrate him into your understanding of the world more generally. I mean, there are other good books. I think of all the Deleuze scholars, the ones that are more legit would be like Manuel Delanda is fairly good, although he's got that kind of very flowery European kind of verbosity. Brian Masumi is good. I think I think they're probably the best. I like Zizek's book on Deleuze. I think it's funny and interesting. It doesn't actually have that much to do with Deleuze, but it's worth reading. Badiou's book on Deleuze is kind of interesting. I was actually reading the other day. Badiou's he wrote letters to Deleuze, and it's kind of funny. Like apparently Deleuze didn't really respond, or he responded, but not very enthusiastically. And Badiou says at one point that they had a non-relationship. It was just like Badiou mostly sending things, and I think Deleuze kind of vaguely replying, and Deleuze ultimately decided to not allow his letters to Badiou to be published. It's not exactly clear why, but yeah, it's kind of funny. Anyway, but Badiou's letters to Deleuze are kind of interesting. You can find them online. They're kind of short and make some interesting points. King Cameron asks, do I subscribe to the idea that art has to be socially realist? No. No. I subscribe to the kind of hyperstitional model in which art should be producing future realities. That's what I think. What else do we got? King Cameron says, it seems from this discussion of censorship, you kind of posit art into something that must relate to society in such a way that progresses it in the context of techno-communist patchwork. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, art is creative, and creative intrinsically means to produce novel futures, right? I mean, any act of creativity is technically a kind of production of a future that wasn't already there and that wasn't even necessarily seen as possible before it was produced. So, yeah, that's kind of what art and politics have in common. And I do think that that's an ineluctable kind of function, and you might even say responsibility that falls upon the artist to produce the future. Yeah. Who else is here? Say hi. Is it other than James and King Cameron? The last time I did this on a Wednesday, there were actually more people about halfway through. Like we're about halfway through right now. This time there's a few less. I thought Saturday would be better for people since people are less likely to be working. But ironically, it turns out that I think last month we did it on a Wednesday, and there were about, I think, 6 people for the most part. I think now there's only 3. I don't mind. It's fine. It gives us more time to talk with each other. But I'll have to see if maybe Saturday's not the best day. We'll see what people say. We'll see if there's any feedback. James, man, you can ask as many questions as you want. Looks like there's only 3 people here today, so you have my undivided attention. But Neural Shroud left, so I think there's King Cameron, there's James Simkin, and there's some other person just hanging out. So if you want to say hi, that'd be cool. This is private, it's not going to be seen by anyone except patrons. So, oh. How are you folks doing? How are your lives? What are you going through? Tell me something deep. Tell me something interesting, difficult. I will, maybe I can opine or just listen. Maybe you just need someone to listen to you. All right, here we go. So James says, what if J.G. Michael's thoughts on positive transhumanism and the transfiguration of Christ means that transhumanism might actually lead us to become more human than we actually are, not less? Hmm. Enabling us to shed our base biological natures and become more compassionate, more forgiving, more gracious. In short, to become more Christ-like. Hmm. It's possible. It's definitely possible. In the biblical eschatology, there is a lot to the effect that it's very accelerationist, really, that as things get worse, they also, in a weird way, are getting better. And that as we approach end times, there is catastrophe and extreme decadence and sinfulness, but there is also, you know, a kind of filtering or selection process where, you know, the meek shall inherit the earth, and the righteous will be distinguished and will go to heaven and all of that. So I do think that there is something to this, that as capitalism accelerates and in some sense brutalizes us and dehumanizes us, and because of market competition, we essentially have to become more and more exploitative of ourselves and others. And in a weird way, at the same time, capitalism is forcing us to dehumanize, whether we like it or not, simply by virtue of surviving. We essentially are dehumanizing. In a weird way, it does lead one to wonder if this is some kind of roundabout purification process in which people are also becoming more aware of these kinds of intrinsic exploitative aspects or features of kind of human life as we know it. And in a weird way, capitalist intensification or acceleration does kind of encourage some people to take greater risks to fight for what they really believe in some sense. Like, just to use myself as an example, just because it's the ethnographic data that I have most at hand, there's nothing special about my case, but it's what I know. Like, in some sense, the capitalist acceleration of, let's say, academia, for instance, it it made me, over the past 10 years, 20 years, whatever, it made me a kind of more brutalized, dehumanized, and exploiting type of person. Like, to succeed in academia today, you have to be essentially like a small business person. You have to be like really competitive, really kind of strategic and exacting and non-compromising and disciplined. That was forced upon me to succeed in this kind of increasingly competitive niche. But at the same time, although it did kind of make me a worse and worse person, it made me a kind of less and less human person in some sense. It also kind of triggered a kind of intolerable threshold where I was like, okay, actually, this isn't worth it anymore. If capitalism is accelerating so much that life just increasingly sucks, even for people who play by the rules and do everything right, then I'm just going to say fuck it and try to naively chart a course that is more reflective of what I believe in. And so, in a weird way, what I'm getting at is it is possible, perhaps, that precisely as capitalism gets worse, it does have a way of sort of forcing some other things to get better. And I don't know J.G. Michael's particular ideas about positive transhumanism. I haven't heard him talk about that. But the basic idea that transhumanism might somehow lead us to become more human. Yeah, I kind of get it. Like, if you think my other kind of relationship to this would be kind of the use of AI or like machine learning. So these are essentially non-human forms of intelligence. They're, machinic intelligence. And for a human to use these kind of machinic intelligence supplements is intrinsically a kind of transhuman type of process. And as someone who uses machine learning algorithms like pretty often, honestly, whether I'm writing them my own, which I'm not like a very, very advanced machine learning expert or anything like that. But I have written some scripts to use some of these algorithms for various concrete purposes. And then for other things, I might just use off the shelf tools like from Google Cloud or AWS or whatever. I actually use machine learning pretty practically, like quite often for various tasks, whether it be like transcribing audio into text or whatever. I use it in my production processes pretty regularly. And so this is a type of transhuman vector because I'm outsourcing my brain work to these machines, these machinic intelligences. And on the one hand, a lot of people want to say, oh, that's inhuman, Justin. You're like, that's dehumanizing. You should be doing this stuff by hand because that's like the true way for the humanist scholar to do intellectual work. That's one way of seeing it. But another way of seeing it, and I wonder if this is what J.G. Michaels is kind of driving at, is that by using these tools, in some sense, it is dehumanizing. I am kind of carving out and letting go of the kind of human kernel in my thinking and writing and production processes. But in a weird way, I'm also getting rid of a lot of gunk, right? I'm for instance, I'm releasing a lot of kind of bourgeois decadent investments in the bourgeois ego or something like this, right? Like the humanist scholar who does everything by hand and, does everything with this mystique or aura of, unique human genius. There's a lot of sinful, stupid crap hiding in that kind of humanistic aura or mystique, like, selfishness and pride and a variety of other kind of mistakes and errors. So in a weird way, the machinic intensification has a way of brutally excising traditional forms of human stupidity and sin. And you could argue that that is, in some sense, we are becoming more human through the machines. The machines are filtering out all of that within us, which is false or disingenuous or bad in some kind of ethical way. Possibly. That's possible. I find that not implausible and a possible vector of inquiry. What do you think of that? What are you folks doing today? King Cameron wants to know, Justin, do you have a favorite contemporary or historical visual artist? It's a good question. I have to admit to being something of a dullard or simpleton when it comes to visual art. The truth is, I don't have extremely strong aesthetic sensibilities. I'm very, very cerebral and I'm obsessed with ideas and kind of verbal cognitive formations. But I've never been that touched by paintings or even, you know, cinema, or to the degree I've been touched by cinema, it's the kind of intellectual content of films, but visual, I'm a little visually numb. That's just a caveat. Obviously, I'm educated, and I understand that a part of being an educated person is, of course, having a profound appreciation for visual art. So, I had many years of pretending to care about art. And I do know a little bit about the history of art, but when I'm perfectly honest, I don't care too much. I'm not touched very much by visual art, and maybe that's my own shortcoming. It's something I wouldn't mind cultivating. Having said that, I do have some artists that I've always liked. I couldn't tell you much about why, but I've always really been impressed by Cezanne. For me, I'm always very interested in the biography of artists. I see all I see and judge visual art, mm, very much so based on the type of person and the details and the data about the person's life. For me, it's just it's an essential kind of supplement of information for me to understand what a work of art is, and for me to be affected by a work of art. Like, I I guess I really subscribe to a kind of um, or what do they call it? A psychobiographical approach to some things. And I think with art, especially in the contemporary period where it's so cheap and easy to produce art, everyone's a creator. There's so much content out there. And really after kind of the revolution of modern art, and there was this real kind of breaking down of barriers regarding what counts as art. Once that happened, it became really difficult to know what you're looking at. To me, it became very difficult to really care, because when everyone is creating everything and there are no rules and whatever, when you look at a piece of work, even if it's big, even if it's seems kind of impressive, well, it's just too easy to do nowadays. It's too easy to create some kind of large piece of work. So the size or the time required, or even the kind of the prowess or the virtuosity of the work itself is not really a good indicator of artistic quality, in my view, simply because machines make it really easy to do kind of high fidelity representations. And so, you know, if a painter is able to achieve impressive verisimilitude, for instance, once upon a time that might have been impressive, but in the age of machines, you don't even know if that is an indicator of quality. So for me, I've never been able to judge works of art. And honestly, I've never even been able to really care or feel anything about works of art apart from the biography of the person. I have to know about who it is, when they're working, and what type of person they are. How did they actually conduct their life? To me, it's an absolutely essential question for understanding or appreciating art. And so most of my answers about who are my favorite artists, my visual artists, are basically, they boil down to the biography of the person. So Cezanne, for instance, I've always been really interested and impressed by Cezanne, in part just because he's one of these people who's just obviously an obsessive, who had a particular kind of vision or a line of flight, if you will, and pretty much just fucked off on every other responsibility of life to just paint all day, every day in the hills of Provence. And that kind of single-minded obsession and dedication, I think, is a really strong, incredible signal that the person is actually, they're doing something special. They see something unique. They're trying to accomplish something that no one else has ever accomplished. They're searching for something, even if they don't know exactly what it is. So I think Cezanne is a very impressive case of that, and that made me very interested in his work. And I did read a few books about his paintings, and I think for that reason, I think his paintings are more beautiful and more interesting. I'm able to appreciate and respect them more. So I'm able to enjoy them more when I look at them. Um, I've also always been interested in Manet. I think his pictures of people and society are really beautiful and also kind of just intriguing and funny in a way. Um, I'm kind of a sucker for the mystique of kind of turn of the century um, French intellectuals in general. And so the luncheon on the grass, for instance, the Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, I think it is. I probably just butchered that, but it translates as like afternoon on the grass or whatever. I'm sorry, luncheon on the grass. And it's very weird. It's just peculiar, right? You've probably seen it before. It's like a naked lady sitting with a man in the woods, and they're having a picnic, and then across from them is like a Turk, I think it is, or someone with like a turban on. It's just very bizarre and but beautiful. And I think those paintings are really interesting. If you've ever been to Paris, I think the best museum is the Musée d'Or. Is it called? Man, I'm these all these French names are totally escaping me. I think I'm totally botching them. I shouldn't even try when I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, there's a smaller museum. Like most people go to the Louvre, but and the Louvre's worth going to, but there's the smaller museum that has just all the best and a higher concentration of the kind of impressionistic and post-impressionistic French painters. And yeah, like Olympia, for instance, Manet's Olympia, I've always found also very kind of just fascinating and cool. The woman is like kind of beautiful, but she's not that beautiful. She's just kind of like a norm. She's like very normy, kind of like slightly chubby, um, like pasty white hooker. And but it's just kind of interesting and enchanting. And there's like a black woman next to her who's I think bringing her flowers or something like that. And the black woman has this kind of knowing look. I've always interpreted it as like she kind of sees through. She kind of sees through the this like this this woman, this hooker woman who I don't know the hooker woman. She's like sympathetic, but also she's decadent and slightly degenerate, but kind of in a way that is I don't know, in a way that is just kind of the whole kind of emotional ensemble and the social ensemble of that painting, for instance, is I've always just liked looking at it. What else are there others? I actually was for a while quite into Marcel Duchamp. I think he's really smart actually, and one of my one of my favorite pieces was in the Philadelphia Museum when I was living there. The big glass panel. Man, I'm really shit with names. I forget. I did know the name of it, but there's this big wacky glass panel. Um, it's something about the bride. It's got a long weird name, an obscure title, but it's something with the bride. I do believe. So if you search Duchamp bride, you should be able to find something. It's a really bizarre, large glass sculpture thing, and but I always thought that was really dope. I had a period where I was really into Mark Rothko. I like the kind of simplicity and the and kind of the power of these like large, pretty simple um, panels. Oh yeah, King Cameron's got it. The bride being torn bare by her bachelors. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it is. It's close. Um, I could have sworn it was something like, yeah, I'll check it later. But stripped bare, something like that. You can look it up. So, right. What else? Yeah, I liked Rothko. Like, if you go, I think to the Chicago Museum of Art, I think that's where it was. I forget if this was a rotating exhibition or if it's always there. But Mark Rothko did a particular series of very large red and black canvases, and he was essentially trying to recreate a kind of religious experience. Like he was trying to make like a profound experience of being in like a chapel. I forget the title of this one, but um, I think Mark Rothko is pretty legit. Like, a lot of the abstract painters get a bad rap, and I think some of them are fakers, but I think Mark Rothko was pretty legit because I saw those. I saw his collection of the big red and black ones. I forget what they're called. They might even be called Chapel. I think it might have been called like Mark Rothko's Chapel or something like that. If you Google that, you might be able to find it. And they were pretty damn impressive. Like when I walked into the room, I felt something. And I'm pretty like skeptical of art, so I'm pretty immune to like the placebo effect, I think. So I feel like that. I feel like those paintings were quite impressive. I always thought Mark Rothko was pretty cool and legit. What else? I kind of like Paul Klee. I got into Paul Klee through Deleuze and Guattari, who cite him, and also I think use some of his clips. For people who don't know, the logo or the imagery that I use for the Other Life icons, it's comes from a Paul Klee painting. I forget the title of it, but it's something with tombs. I think it's called like Three Tombs or something like that. If you zoom out, I always use like a zoomed in version, so you can't really tell what's going on. Like you don't really know where it comes from. Most people can't identify that it's a Paul Klee painting. But if you look at that canvas, it's like a big, cool kind of. It kind of looks like stained glass, and it has crucifixes. So it has this kind of like pretty explicitly kind of Christian, very kind of foreboding, but beautiful kind of Christian vibe. So, yeah, I think Paul Klee is really interesting. I also read a book by Paul Klee, like his notebooks. If you read his notebooks, he had some really fascinating and legit, takes on philosophy of symbols, for instance. Like his notebooks are very interesting. He talks about this is why Deleuze and Guattari, I think, are interested in him and cite him. He talks about like what is the meaning of a line? What is the meaning of a circle? What's the difference between a circle and a line? And he does it in this like kind of idiosyncratic philosophical way that's quite creative and intriguing. And I remember reading those notebooks and being like, okay, this guy's onto something. He's got, he's the real. That's like what I mean by the real deal. He's on his own line of inquiry and is pretty divorced from mundane social pressures. And again, when I see that, that's when I'm like, all right, this guy's the real deal. And then I become more interested in the work, and I'm affected by it more. King Cameron says, check out Elliot Earls, really nice contemporary artist that deals with transhumanism and Catholicism. That's cool. I'll check it out. Yeah, sounds cool. Musée d'Orsay. That's what it was. The Musée d'Orsay. Yeah, that's the best museum in Paris. What else? What was the other name that I botched? I should look it up. Oh yeah, the Manet painting. It's Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe. I think I said that right, actually. My French is very rusty. I haven't dealt with French texts in a while. A little bit for the Deleuze book, but I used to be able to speak French phrases fairly well. I can read a bit of French. I did study French for a couple of years actually in grad school, fairly seriously. So I can read it decently. But when you don't speak it ever, you sound like an asshole when you do. James says Caspar David Friedrich, his work is so melancholic, particularly The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog. Yeah, famous, very Nietzschean, right? And Edvard Munch, The Brooch. Is that the Scream? I'm not sure. Let's see. Apparently, there's a book series called the Brooch series. That's nice. Looks like a woman. Oh shit. Hey, sorry about that. I think I'm back on, am I? Yeah. Sorry about that. My computer battery died. I had to go run up and get a charger. Sorry about that. But we're coming up on the end anyway. It's only an hour session. And if you have any last questions or comments, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out. And yeah, we'll see what other people say. Maybe I'll get some messages saying that people wanted to come, but for some reason Saturday doesn't work. So I'll just have to figure out what the best day and time is. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. It's always cool to spend some quality time with the patrons. James says, isn't exit Protestant but voice Catholic? The word of the Lord. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would find that a very useful or reliable division or correlation there, because exit is a perfectly common practice, really, in the history of Christianity, of true Christianity, of Catholicism. I mean, it's the Benedict option, essentially. This guy, Rod Dreher, talks about this. Catholics have always had a kind of tendency periodically to, when the decadence and degeneracy reaches a certain threshold, to just flee, whether it be into the desert or into, some other type of community or order. In some sense, priests are exiting society. True, monks exit society. So, no, I don't think. And voice doesn't really make sense because, Catholicism is a very authoritarian system. The democratic opinions of the laity don't really matter that much. Like, we don't vote for what is church policy, right? So, no, I would say voice is not any more privileged in a Catholic tradition than exit. But loyalty, that would be the third item in Albert Hirschman's triptych that I think would be most associated with the Catholic tradition. The duty to loyalty. All right, folks. Unless you got anything else, speak now or forever hold your peace. This is fun. Oh, now we have 5 people in the house. Figures. Well, it's okay. If anyone wants to sneak in a last question or comment, I'm here for a couple more minutes. But this was fun. I really enjoyed this, just like I quite enjoyed the first patron-only live stream. It's just kind of cool doing something with a smaller group of people that I'm kind of more, I guess, closely connected with in some sense. Even if I don't know you all well, it's kind of nice doing a small scale conversation with people who I know, kind of, not to sound all sentimental or get all corny on you or whatever, but in some sense, I know that you guys care about me in some sense, and I appreciate that. So, and you support me. So it feels kind of cool and unique to be doing a little live stream hangout thing where it's just a small group of people who I know, support me, care about me, makes me care about you, makes me want to be here. Cool. Who's new in the house, by the way? 2 people just rocked up. If you want to say your name and say hi or whatever, at the very least. Pretty sure there's a little delay so that when I speak, it doesn't actually get onto your computer wherever you are until I think it's about 30 seconds, but I think in some cases, sometimes it can be a little bit more. So it's kind of awkward because when I speak to you, I have to kind of wait quite a long time before I can assume. that you've actually heard it. But so in my time, in my world, it is now 11 a.m. So that's the end of this session. But since it's going to take some time to get to you, I will hang out for a few extra minutes. Cameron asks if I'm a tea or coffee guy. Definitely coffee. I got into tea a little bit when I lived in England. I definitely appreciate tea more now than I used to. Like England definitely taught me to like it. And it can be nice for sure. But definitely coffee over tea for the most part. Just more caffeine. I need that shit. Hmm. All right, take it easy, Cameron. Later, folks. All right, I'm out of here too. Thanks again for hanging out with me. It's been cool. Let's do it again next month. Let me know if this is a bad time or if there's a better time that you think would work better. I'm open to suggestions, but if there's not a major protest, then I think we're going to end up sticking with this time. So, yeah, I hope you're all well. I hope you have a good day and a good week. And thanks for supporting me, as always. Very grateful. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be upgrading my audio equipment soon, very soon. So, yeah, and that's all thanks to you folks for supporting me. I'm going to get some nicer mics so we can do like in-person, multi-person live streams and podcasts that actually sound, easy on the ears. I don't think my audio has been terrible up until now, but there's a noticeable difference between kind of random DIY audio on like a whatever USB mic and like proper microphones with XLR cables and a mixer and all of that. So I'm really eager to get that sorted really well. So yeah, that's thanks to you folks, and hopefully soon you'll start noticing some much better audio. All right, folks, take it easy. Wish you the best. Shoot me a message if you need anything. Later.